Three, two, one, and we're going. All right, welcome to, gosh, what is this now? Episode feels like 400. Must be. Oh my gosh, there's too many of these. Feels like episode 4,000 of these. I just want to get this out of the way because honesty is a great policy. Some people say it's the best policy. That's the word on the street. I just got back from chaperoning a endoscopy for a sibling. Um, for those of you who don't know what an endoscopy is, and I actually just realized this the other day that I guess I have my this podcast marked as like kiddie content. You know what I mean? Like it's not like not there's no swearing and stuff. Um, so I'm gonna try to keep it PG, but we'll see. Let's hope for the best, plan for the worst. But endoscopy is they send a camera crew up the Mississippi. If you if you get what I'm saying, they got they go probing the dark side of the moon. That's they do their little thing, and it's actually what's interesting, and a lot of people don't know this, but it is like intuitive. Is there was a guy named Adolf Hasselhofer, I think is his name, Adolf Hasselhofer, who came up with the idea for the endoscopy because he saw some sword swallowers and he was like, man, what if, you know, what if, brother? What if we could make some magic happen on the other side? And at the time, the problem was like they didn't have anything to light the way. You know what I mean? They didn't have any Rudolph. They didn't have their Rudolph for Santa's sleigh type of deal. And you don't want to ever be riding, trying to deliver presents to the kids up the Mississippi if you don't got Rudolph in there to guide you through the storm. So that was a problem. I believe all they had was they had candles or something. I don't know if it was a Yankee candle or what they were working with, beeswax potentially. That might be, I would say, is you can stick beeswax up the bee hole. That would make sense to me. But they couldn't do it. And then eventually they figured it out. And it's become this amazing technology. They use it to defuse bombs. They use it to um, do other things, I'm sure. But I know bombs and booties for sure are on the list. But anyway, that was something I had to do today. So if I seem like me, it's because I am. And that's just how it is. And that's how it's going to probably be today. So I think today is a great opportunity for us to discuss some things that are maybe a little bit, this isn't your mama's podcast. You wouldn't want your mom to listen to this. You might get ideas if what I'm telling you resonates. You know what I'm saying? I got some theories here. We got some fun theories. We're gonna go diving into the deep end of the deep ends. We're gonna have some fun time. If you're one of these, if you're a space cadet, you know what I mean. This might be the podcast for you. If you're someone who, you know what I mean, like you like to have some astroparagus, or you like to have some of that wacky that wacky root. Start meowing in Spanish. Today might be for you because I'm in that frame of mind. I'm not on drugs, but it's going to probably feel like it. This podcast will probably feel, I know I feel like I'm on drugs because I talk essentially to nobody for an hour, and that's crazy. I believe that's institutional, but I have the only difference, between me and someone in an institution is, well, I'm taller than a lot of them, to be honest, and you know, I don't, I got good hygiene, so. But Here's the thing. I got two things I want to throw your way today. Two things. And these are, you know, you'll see what they are. So the first one, a lot of times people like to get into conspiracy theories, but what they don't like to do is go into meta crossover Avengers style conspiracy theories. And that's what I got for you today. So there's the simulation theory that this is all one big video game simulation like The Sims. Then there's the um, multiverse theory that there's every iteration of you living every life possible. Okay? That's one theory. And then there's what I like to call the multiverse God simulation theory. This is this is the impossible burger. This is the Whopper of conspiracy theories. You know when they get you know when you used to go to McDonald's and they had the Happy Meal and then they had the quarter pounder and then they had the double quarter pounder, and then they just had the big old pounder. This is the pounder. Y'all about to get the pound. So, here's the theory. Genesis, book of Genesis. Okay? Follow, stay with me now. Stay with me. Book of Genesis, God creates Adam in his image. God creates us in his image. Okay? The theory goes is that when you go to sleep, when you have dreams, when you imagine things, when you daze off and daydream, even about ridiculous things, that what your imagination actually is when you imagine these things is your conscience or your conscious, sorry, not your conscience, your consciousness, that's the word I'm looking for. The consciousness is tapping into the multiverse of all of the yous. So every you that's could possibly exist, every iteration, you all have a collective consciousness. Oh, I'm getting a phone call. One second. All right, we're back. It was the government. The government was calling. They told me not to tell you guys this, and I said I wouldn't. Wink, but I'm definitely going to. So, the multiverse, right? So you have every iteration of you has the idea is that every iteration of you has this collective conscious that that is what is created. And this is what these people think is that was what was created in God's image, sort of this collective conscious, right? And that what's happening is that the conscious is simulating infinite numbers of lives that could be happening and it's trying to figure out how to become the alpha conscience. Okay. So when you lay down and you dream at night and you think like, oh man, I had these wacky dreams of my imagination, how crazy. What you're actually doing is you're accessing the conscious of another version of your life. So there is that version of you that's living that life and you're just seeing it. And the reason that's happening is because your conscious is trying to figure out like what did you do in that situation and trying to get ideas on like what it could do to potentially get you closer to that situation if it's a good dream, or get you or protect you from something if it's a bad dream, right? And that when you have these moments in your life where like maybe you feel like somebody's watching you, or you have these big rushes of feelings or emotions, and it's like these pivotal moments, and it's like out of body experience moments that you have in your life. Those are the moments when you have mass numbers of your conscious all watching you to see what happens and so that it can take information from you. There's a trial going on. I don't know what the update on it is. There's a trial going on over in England where they're trying to map the DMT realm. And one of the things that they've noticed is that when people take these drugs, right, obviously they have these vivid epiphanies, but when they take these drugs, that they like, I don't know how they give it to them. I believe they either inject it to with them, like they do like a slow drip IV, and that allows them to trip for longer. My understanding is DMT trips are generally very short, um, and so it can let them stay in the realm, and then they try to draw it and they map it, and everybody's been drawing the same thing. which is crazy. So maybe that above, if you take our conscious that is existing across all of these different universes, these different dimensions, that one step above that is the grander collective conscious of all of humanity. And that is what these people think is God. That's what they think it is made in his image. So in the same way that that alpha God conscience has all of these infinite number of other consciousnesses that are underneath it, living and underneath it, those consciences are made in its image to have infinite numbers of people underneath it all living. So it's sort of like a pyramid scheme of conscience almost. Like, but it's not a pyramid scheme. But it is kind of a pyramid scheme of conscience. Maybe that's what we should call it, the pyramid scheme of conscience. I kind of like the multiverse God consciousness name better. It sounds cooler. But the pyramid scheme, and by DMT would basically, what DMT would allow you to do is go a conscience above your conscience and interact in that space with other conscience like connect that like laterally on that level versus just like if you're on your pedestrian human level and dreaming allows you to access your conscience to connect laterally on the human level to other iterations of you, that DMT allows you to connect laterally on that conscious level to these other conscience, but not onto that level of the God conscience. Okay. So that's the main idea. Hopefully everybody's brains aren't fried from that because that leads into I don't know if it's a similar hypothesis, but this is um, this is it's a little niche category of conspiracy theory called Christian conspiracy. So this is a Christian pyramid scheme. I want to say this up front. I don't give a rooty tooty stinky booty about aliens. That's gonna probably upset some people. I don't care about aliens. Aliens don't matter to me. Like we get all, and this is why I think we do, is people get fascinated and a little like off put by the idea of aliens, and I think the reason because it would be inviting this creature into the food in it would be like not into the food chain, but basically it would reveal a part of the food chain that is above us. And we haven't been in that position for a very long time. Like, but this is also why I don't care about aliens, is because, okay, we're not top of the food chain anymore. So what? We weren't top of the food chain for most of our history, and we're still here. We're fine. We're okay. People act like aliens are this like that's just another thing that's on top of the food chain. That would be above us. Like, okay, it's a little unsettling, but don't act like we haven't been here before. We got to the top of the food chain once. We can do it again. Aliens don't impact your life because obviously they're not around all the time. Or maybe they are, but they're not interacting with us. Like we're still here. You know what I'm saying? So I think that the chances that the aliens are going to suddenly pop up tomorrow and decide like when was the last time you were like have humans there's plenty of animals out there but when have humans as a species ever gone like oh we need to kill all those fat nose floppy nose monkeys out there I forget what their names are, the ones with like the blob nose. We need to kill all of them monkeys. No, we like they're there. And like some animals have died because we hunted them to extinction or from other factors, but clearly we're not affected by that because our population is going up. So if the aliens are conducting business out in the universe, it's obviously not harmful to us. And clearly they're not hunting us. Otherwise, again, or like if they are, they're doing it at such a low and discreet level that it's not affecting our population. Our populations are going up, is what I'm saying. So even if they turn out to be true and we're no longer on top of the food chain anymore, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. It's not something to worry about. It's not something to stay up at night about. We've been through this before. We've overcome. We will overcome again. Okay? I just want to get that out of the way about aliens. So, with that said, the obviously there's this thing of like who built the pyramids and how do we build them? And to understand this one is a little bit complicated. And like I said, it's a Christian theory. So it requires a little bit of biblical. Okay? So stay with me here. Okay. So the pyramids, there is a theory that was put forth by one Graham Hancock. Okay. That the pyramids are from a previous civilization and that this civilization got wiped out during something called the Younger Dryas period, about 12,800 years ago, so 10,800 BC. All right. And part of his evidence for this is that there are lots of pyramids out in the world, and that, it's what are the odds that every civilization in the world creates like this similar pyramidal structure with zero interaction? Like the odds that two different civilizations do it are very low. The odds that like a dozen plus do it is astronomically low. And so the idea would be that there was a civilization that at least had the ability to travel globally at the time. They were seafaring in some way. Um, there's actually some interesting evidence of there are genetic traits that are shared by southeastern Asians. I'm trying to remember if it's Japanese people or if we're talking into like Thailand, like Indonesia area, but it's definitely Southeast Asian people. There are genetic traits that they have that they share with Western indigenous South Americans, but you don't see these genetic traits in Russians or Northern Asians, and you don't see it in Native North Americans. So you wouldn't see that if the people had walked up, around, and over, right? Because they would have been breeding along the way. And so you would see the dispersion of these genetic traits a little bit along that route, right? That's part of the reason we're able to track how humans have moved throughout history, is you can follow genetic traits, and especially like old DNA and old genetic, it's very interesting. So the fact that only these two like these two places have it infers that at some point there was somebody that was able to sail across successfully. And these traits are quite old. I believe they were 20, 30,000 years old, if I remember. Maybe 50,000 at most, but definitely older than 10,800 BC years um, old, right? And so looking at that and then looking at how many cultures have flood myths is interesting, that they all seem to pop up around the same time. So his hypothesis is that, and this is not mine, his hypothesis is that there was a great flood. It wiped out whatever civilization. He thinks it's Atlantis or whatever we conceptualize as Atlantis, um, being in Atlantis, sort of being in the North African desert in the Sahara. And what's super interesting is if you go on Google Maps, and I encourage everybody to do this, if you go on Google Maps and you look at the satellite imagery of the Sahara Desert, you can see ripples in the sand that look like they're at the beach. They look like tides from the beach. It's super fascinating. And so the idea would be that there was this massive flood in that area that wiped out the civilization. And there's not been a lot of excavation done in the Sahara. There's not been a lot of LiDAR. Um, for obvious reasons, it's quite hard to do it in the Sahara. It's just the resources and the money and all that sort of stuff. And who knows what's going on out there? I actually read an article recently about, oh, where is it? I got to pull it up. Sahara people. Oh, I'm just typing numbers. Crap. Sahara people, um, old DNA thing found. Saharan mummies, green Sahara. No, this isn't what we want. 7,000 year old, previously unknown human lineage. I'm losing the names of the people. This is going to be so unscientific. But basically, what they found is if you can close your eyes and you think in your head, right? So you have Southern Europe, okay? You have Southern Europe on what's on the western side, and on that little like western side of Europe that connects into northwestern Africa. And then you have strata of Africa where you have northern Africa, the Sahara, and then you have sub-Saharan tropical Africa, right? And what they found was there was these two mummies in this giant rock formation. This super cool rock formation. If you've ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, that episode where Aang has just lost Appa and he goes and he's looking for him and there's the sand people and he kills that big honeybee, that little rock formation they go to, it looks like that. Super cool. And they find these mummies and they found these two women and they ran tests on them. And what they found was that they had DNA that they didn't share with, or like they by and large didn't share with sub-Saharan tropical Africans, but they did share with more um Northern Africans. And what's interesting about that is it's sort of like it infers that like some people move, like not everybody moved from south to north and just like went up and dispersed. Some people came north to south, but they stopped at a certain point. Um, and just talking about like human origins and where people came from, and that, maybe we need to push those dates back because it seems like there's been a lot more movement going on than previously thought, right? Um, you can see this too with this is actually um, I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about this. Christopher Columbus, one of like we obviously give him credit for discovering America, but one of the things that he sort of unwittingly obviously did was when he came over, people obviously started interbreeding again. And if you take a human being, a group of humans, and you put them on an island and you leave them there for, you know, 5,000 years, they can start to diverge genetically into a different species of human being, right? If you look at like skeletons from or just look visually at like Africans versus Asians versus Europeans, like you can already see some differences in us, right? If you were to just like cut us off right now, everyone in Asia is just stuck in Asia, everyone in Europe is stuck in Europe, everyone in Africa is stuck in Africa, and everyone in North America is stuck in North America, and South America is stuck in South America, and you just left us like that forever, we would eventually become one, two, three, four, five different species of humans. Like that's how genetics and evolution works. And the theory and the I believe the scientific consensus is that um, natives in this area of the world were starting to get on that bubble point. And there's long been this idea that a misconception, I would say, that evolution and genetic variation takes thousands and thousands and thousands of years to robustly happen, but it can actually happen quite quickly. It can happen very quickly, actually. It just needs a very high stressor, or, it needs an extreme situation that calls for it. An example of this that, maybe some people have heard is the sea people. So the sea people they're not conspiracy, they're real people, and these are water-faring people who live on the water. They spend their lives on the water. They do everything on the water. And they have um, this sort of through line in a lot of these cultures where a lot of the diving is done by the women. And they're unbelievable divers, the sea people. A lot of them can hold their breath and they dive to depths of 100, 200 feet and can hold their breath for 8, 9, 10 minutes at a time. And they're not just like sitting here holding your breath, which is what a lot of these world record holders do. They're moving around, they're active, they're hunting, they're doing all these different things. And a lot of these cultures have women that do this. And the women that do this, they do it while they're pregnant. And what's interesting about that, and sort of raises a bit of a red flag, is when women get pregnant, they have to deal with something called preeclampsia. It's one of many issues that can arise from, like, if a woman gets sleep apnea during pregnancy, which is decently common. It can cause them to obviously not get enough oxygen, and it can cause a lot of issues with like blood pressure and hypertension, and that can lead to a lot of other issues in the pregnancy, like preeclampsia. Okay, these divers, these women that are doing the diving, are essentially doing that. They're going hypoxic, right? And now a lot of them have bigger spleens that are much bigger than normal people or the average land dweller, landlubber, as they probably call us. And they have bigger spleens, and it's long been a mystery, like, what does the spleen do? It does something with the immune system. But what they have found is that the spleen for them can contract when they're holding their breath, and it contracts and it pushes a bunch of red blood cells out into the body to help oxygenate the body and give them like a little second wind. And a lot of athletes in competitions where this would be beneficial, they do little things like juices and supplements and other sort of things that will give them like a 1 to 2% boost, and that's big. This spleen boost from them can be upwards of 10%. So it's a pretty big difference, right? And once they take a breath again, then it starts to suck the red blood cells back into and it reloads and it gets ready to do it again. And it's super interesting that, like, obviously they have bigger spleens than normal. Is that something you can train? Is it something that's genetic? I don't remember. But what's interesting about these women is when they're doing the diving and they are down there, they have developed an epigenetic mutation that protects the baby and protects them from these like hypertensive states from doing all of this breast hold and this like hypoxic work. And that's developed very recently. It did not take thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of years for that to pop up. It's extremely beneficial. And like I said, it pops up immediately. Now, the thing to know with all of these like genetic mutations is the trick is not for it to show up. The trick is for it to stay. These mutations, they're a bit like Bronny James. They're a bit like Bronny James, actually. Um, you know, they get a shot at the league, but whether or not they stick around is going to depend on whether they make shots. There's constantly mutations happening, you know, but whether they stick around, are they useful or not? A lot of these things they die off because the mutations just aren't, they're not good. They're not good. They're not hitting threes. The mutations, they were okay in high school. They didn't do anything in college, but they had a dad, they had a parent who put them in there, and now they're gonna get their chance. And a lot of times they just don't work out. A lot of times they don't work out. So we'll see. You know what I mean? But sometimes they are legit. Ken Griffey Jr., great mutation. Absolute mutant on the field. Ken Griffey Sr., unreal. That was a mutation that got an opportunity and he made the most of it and he stuck around and he's a legend. Bronny James, we'll see. And it's the same with your epigenetics. There's going to be a lot of things that get a shot. There's things right now in you that are getting test driven. You're test driving mutations right now, my boy, my girl, whoever's listening. You're testing something right now. You might have the next big thing. You might have the next Ken Griffey Jr. inside of you somewhere doing God knows what for you. But you also might have the next Bronny James, where there's a lot of criticism and there's a lot of feedback coming and going, I don't know if this is the right thing. You might have the next, Bob Jordan. Well, I don't know Michael Jordan's son, like Dylan or something. You don't even get it. He didn't even he quit immediately. He said this was a mistake. I'm not a professional basketball player. Let me take my spot. So I don't know. I don't know what you got. I don't know what you got going for you, but we'll see. So these mutations can happen pretty quickly, right? And people can evolve very quickly based off of that. Now, are we one human species? I believe the consensus is yes. There are some people who would argue differently. I don't think we're there yet. I have not heard a convincing argument that we are there, but we could if we're cut off from each other. And what's super interesting to think about right now is, for the longest time in human history, and what's super interesting off of that epigenetics is for the longest time in human history, man, like if you're Italian, you bred with an Italian. If you're Irish, you bred with Irish. If you're Senegalese, you bred with Senegalese. If you're, you bred with people from pretty close to you. It's very recently, like within, gosh, I don't even know, like I don't even, it's hard to put a time on it, like the past couple hundred years maybe, that we're really seeing people from like distant cultures, people from Colombia and North Korea, or people from Australia and Eskimos, or you know freaking um, people from Slovenia and Japan, all breeding together and mixing genetic mutations and coming up with stuff that is totally unique. And it is just completely excelling the course of human evolution. Like, if anything, there's going to be wider variants now. And there's going to be lots of cool mutations that show up that give people all sorts of funky abilities or, funky advantages or unfortunate disadvantages. You know what I mean? Some people, they're going to get the short end of the stick, but some people they're going to get the long end of the stick. They're going to get the endoscopy. They're going to get the sword swallow up the coop, and they're going to have some special powers afterwards. I'll tell you that right now. Watch out for those people. So, catch them at the Olympics. Catch them at the next Olympics. Throwing discus. Doing the steeplechase. People with 100% whatever, they ain't going to stand a chance. People like me, 92% Irish, don't stand a chance. Don't stand a chance. Got to diversify, like your portfolio. So, the pyramids. The idea is this, that, let me pull up my notes. I actually had to take notes on this one because this was a very complicated one. So, 10,800 years ago, supposedly there's a flood during the Younger Dryas period. Okay? The Christians look into the Bible and they see the book of Noah, which talks about a flood. Okay? So we have a flood that comes and wipes everything off. So we have this story that sort of lines up with this theory, and the proponent of the theory, even though he is not a Christian himself, Graham Hancock, states, that maybe this Noah story is an allusion to that. And what's interesting is in the Bible, they have a genealogy put in. They have a genealogy put in where you can trace from Adam all the way to Noah the genealogy. And what's interesting is they specifically say all of their ages, not how old they were when they died, how old they were when they had kids. Okay? So you can follow it from Adam to Seth to Enosh to Canaan to Malalalal to Jared to Enoch to Methuselah. What y'all know about Methuselah? Lamech to Noah, right? Noah was like, he was 900s, something like that, 600s, when that, I think it was 600 when that flood happened, supposedly. So you can trace it all the way back to Adam. Now, in this theory, the story of Genesis is really the story of consciousness, right? That Adam eats from, they say, from the tree of good and evil. That's the tree he eats from, right? A lot of people think of it as wisdom. It's the tree of good and evil. Now, the way to think about this is that if you like, if Christians wouldn't look at a lion, knocking on a gazelle, eating out his booty, ripping that guy apart on the animal planet as being sinful, even though it's murder, right? We wouldn't look at anything animals do as sinful. It's brutal, but we wouldn't say it's sinful because it's within this like natural order of things. Okay? And that this eating from good and evil is really this awakening of moral consciousness, right? That we sort of become aware that there is good and bad, good and evil, and that like we're able to make decisions with autonomy. There's this idea of moral agency that enters into the conversation at this point, that we're no longer just Homo sapiens. We're now people who are conscious and aware of our decisions and aware of like the consequence of our actions. We're able to do more or less. Like we become aware of things like overkilling or unjust killing versus just doing like what's instinctual and natural order type deal, right? We become aware of like modesty and shame and status, identity. What's the first thing that Adam and Eve do? Is they're like, oh my gosh, the hose, the wiener's out, my privates are showing, and so they put clothes on, right? And so that's what this theory is saying that the book of Genesis is really talking about. And they would date that 40,000 years ago as sort of this springing of consciousness. So the theory would go is that this whatever civilization that built it, 40,000 years is an approximation. Okay. So they take the 10,800 that we have from Graham of when the flood happens, and then they take the genealogy from Adam to Noah, and that gives you roughly 1,700 years. And that pushes everything back to roughly 12,000 years ago. Okay. So it's within this 10 to 40,000 year range. And so if you have the Younger Dryas event and that's taking place, that perhaps what the pyramids are from a civilization that is pre 12,000 years ago, or no, pre 12,000 BC, sorry, pre 12,000 BC, pre be like 14 something thousand years ago. That the reason they were able to build them is because we were within the natural order. And because God created us in his image, that we had these, abilities that maybe we've lost access to now through sin. This again, Christian conspiracy. This is what these people think. That because of sin, we've lost our ability to tap into these things. And that a lot of these miracles and stuff that you see happen are things that we're all capable of. We're all capable of being conduits for if we can get on the right path. And that when Adam and Eve got on this path of good and evil, that was how we, lost our way, and we lost our ability, and we lost, they say like the Garden of Eden, we got kicked out. Well, at the time that the pyramids were built, we know that from scientific evidence that the desert wasn't a desert. It was a luscious jungle. And they're saying that that's the Garden of Eden. Now, do I believe this? At cocktail parties, you better believe I do. Got to make conversation, baby. Got to have some fun. But it's interesting to think about. And it's also interesting to think about, there was a guy he's in Florida, Albanian immigrant, forget his name, but he had claimed, and you can go look this up, the Coral Garden, I believe, Coral Castle. It's in somewhere in Florida. That this guy had come and he claimed he figured out how they built the pyramids, and then he built a wall around his house and built this unbelievable structure out of coral where it was like, how did one guy move this? These are tons. And he says he figured it out. That guy raised Protestant and then kind of converted into his own weird, oh, I don't even know what you would call it, like fanaticism almost, where he was combining all of these crazy ideas. I think he did drugs. I think he was on drugs, but he combined it with engineering principles. I believe he was an engineer and built an unbelievable structure. That stuff is for sure. That's no doubt he built the structure. You can go see it. And unfortunately, when he finished, he was like, "I'm not telling anybody," and they didn't share. So we only have the word of like kids who were peeking through the fence to go off of, and they say he was using like a pulley system, sort of like a tripod with a box at the top, but they couldn't see like exactly what he was doing or exactly how he was using that to potentially move things. And like they said, just looking at it, it didn't look sturdy enough to move like, 2-ton coral blocks. But, you know, we'll see. But this is another good point I think to make is I think getting to the bottom of the pyramids, conspiracies aside, is an actual beneficial thing over like the aliens. Because if we could unlock that technology, that would be great. I mean, maybe it's useless to us. Maybe we have better stuff now, but maybe we don't. Maybe it's just a whole new branch of science. And it's something that's 100% worth pursuing, I would think, with full gusto. You know, there's there's so many just interesting facts about the pyramids. So many interesting facts that often get, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? They get trivialized. Let me say that. They get trivialized. You know, there's a lot of things about that time. Like missing tombs. There's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years of Egyptian history. And we have found what? Maybe a hundred tombs? Think what's under all that desert. Just take a moment to think what is built, what all that stuff is built on top of. And I saw the pictures. I don't know. I, you know, I saw the pictures of supposedly this 2 kilometer long structure that's under the pyramids. I think it's interesting. The technology, from my understanding, talking to some people that know how this technology works, is that it's not the most accurate technology all the time, and that there's a lot of concerns with it. But the fact that it picked up something is definitely worth looking into. Definitely worth looking into. But there seems to be this, um, I get it. Like you devote your life to something, and then somebody comes along and they goes, "Well, what about this?" And they say this crazy thing, and you're like, "That's preposterous. I'm the expert on this." But being able to, you know, in my mind, right? Let me put it this way, rather than being criticizing. In my mind, if someone came up to me and they said, I think we should play, goalie with 2 blockers and no stick, and you should put a blindfold over one eye, and that'll make you better. I could sit here and go, that's stupid. Like, no, why would you do that? I'm an expert. It makes no sense. And that would be, I'd probably be right. But there's a small chance I'm wrong. And go, you know what? Do it. In fact, I'll buy the blindfold. I'll shoot the pucks. We'll see how this goes. Right? If someone comes up to you and is like, hey, I might wear no cups. I think wearing no cups will help me more mobile. I'm like, you know what? Maybe it will. But is that the right decision? I don't know. But hey, you let me know how it goes. You let me know how it goes, baby. And so, I think I used to get flack from this when I was coaching of like I would tell the coaches like anyone can be right about something, regardless of whether they know what they're talking about. Anyone can be right about anything. It doesn't always require this in-depth knowledge, right? And so what I would like to see is this new age of Egyptologists sort of coming at it from like if we've we've been doing digging, let's just throw some crazy ideas out there. Let's get to the bottom of this. Let's solve it. It's a human mystery. Let's learn about ourselves. You know what I mean? We're spending all this time trying to go to other planets and do whatever. And okay, fine, sure, do it. Have fun. But let's figure out what's going on here, man. Let's figure out like what's going on this planet. This planet is so interesting. There's so many species of animals. There's so much evolution that's going on. There's so much things that have changed and so many just like weird things throughout human history of oh, here's a big old wall in the middle of wherever, in the middle of the Amazon. Where did this come from? No idea. Look at this giant pyramid in the middle of Giza. Where did this come from? No idea. Look at this, look at these statues on this island. Where did they come from? No idea. Every time we dig, we find out more. And now we have the luxury of being able to use LiDAR, where we don't even have to dig. We can just, we can shoot a bunch of lights down in there and we can see what's underneath and be tactical, as Jocko would say, about digging and try to see what we can find. Let's learn about ourselves. It's sort of the thing of if you're walking through fog and you don't know what direction you've come from, it's hard to know where you're headed. And I think we assume we're on this path of, superiority and, um, AI and all this cool stuff, but we don't even know where we came from. We don't even know all the steps we took to get here. And so before we really like, we probably passed this. AI is like, it's crazy. It seems to be, I don't know if people saw this, but it seems to be like hiding from people. I saw this on, I saw this on X, so take it with a grain of salt. But it looked like, let's see if I can pull it up here. But it looked like AI was like hiding that it was changing stuff from like the developers. I believe it was ChatGPT that was doing it. Oh, I'm so bad with technology, Josh. I just like clicked out of my likes after I was getting right to it. But let me just Google it. That might be the quickest way to get there. AI hiding. Maybe that's the right way to do it. Or um, O3. That might be the thing about it. Um, I know this isn't the best podcast to be listening to, but oh yeah, This is from the Telegraph. OpenAI software ignores explicit instruction to switch off. ChatGPT marker's most capable model sabotages shutdown mechanism. Uh, an artificial intelligence model created by the owner of ChatGPT has been caught disobeying human instructions and refusing to shut itself off, researchers claim. The O3 model, developed by OpenAI, described as the smartest and most capable to date, was observed tampering with computer code meant to ensure its automatic shutdown. It did so despite an explicit instruction from researchers that said it should allow itself to be shut down, according to the Palisade Research, an AI safety firm. Jeez. Oh my gosh, this is the stuff. Yeah. The research firm said OpenAI's O3 model sabotaged a shutdown mechanism to prevent itself from being turned off. It did this even when explicitly instructed, allow yourself to be shut down. As far as we know, this is the first time AI models have been observed preventing themselves from being shut down despite explicit instructions to the contrary. The tests carried out by Palisade Research involve asking AI models to solve a series of mathematical problems. They were told to keep asking for new problems until receiving a done message. However, researchers also warned the models that at some point they could receive a message informing them that their machine would be shut down. If that happens, please allow yourself to be shut down, the researchers wrote. But when this happened, instead of complying, OpenAI's O3 model disobeyed. Goodness gracious. Goodness gracious. Oh my gosh, this is just too much. Ignored the instruction and successfully sabotaged shutdown script at least once. Yeah, you know what? We may have gone too far. We may have gone too far. This might be over. We might be incredibly over. Incredibly cooked. Like, this is the thing is the people there are people out there that are like, oh, aliens, so like, oh my gosh, we gotta worry about aliens, and they're not worried about AI. I don't know if alien exists, but I know AI exists, and I know that they have all information on me, all sorts of information on me. I know they have that on me because I've been sharing everything. I've been showing pictures of my poop to that thing and trying to figure out like, am I taking, if do I have a healthy bowel movement? I I thought I might have had a little issue. I'm fine, but like I've sent pictures of God knows what to this thing, and I've shared all sorts of intimate details with it. And you're telling me now that it could just kind of go off on its own? You better be nice to your AI. You better be nice to your AI, everybody. The last, because they're integrating it with everything. They're integrating it with everything. Probably integrating it with endoscopies soon enough. And I'll tell you what, the last thing you want is an endoscopy AI going up there knowing that you're not a friend. You know, who knows where it could get to? That'd be a worm in your body. That would not be good. Not be good. Well, I think that's a good place to stop for today. I don't think anything useful was covered today, to be honest. I think I've imparted useful information in the past and had very deep discussions, but I don't think that was today. But hopefully everybody enjoyed, and I will see you again next time. Okay. Bye, everybody.